All right,
Roll.
Jayson, thanks for being here. So Jayson,
Jeremy, thanks for having me.
of course, GoldenWest Management, 3 markets, correct? Tell us about your company, how long you've been in business, the size of the company.
So 2004 opened the doors. So next year will be our 20th year anniversary. Um, Besides being a Marine, property management is all that I've ever done. And we started in University Town in Tucson, Arizona. I worked for a top producer at the time, and she needed someone to manage the properties for the investor she was having buy out there. And went from a couple properties to today we're over, I think, 1,000 doors, 32 employees. We are now in the San Diego, the Las Vegas, and the Phoenix markets.
Great. And tell me like just a slight, origin story. When did you decide to start your own? Because you were helping somebody, obviously. And then when did you open more markets? Because 3 markets that far apart is pretty rare for a lot of property managers.
The market thing, I'll get into that, but the basic origin story was I got licensed in 99, while just after I pretty much finished high school. And I was working for a top producer, and she was the one who encouraged me to not only get my license first in California, but then in Arizona. And being from California, we were doing a little bit of property management there, but not a lot. But what you could get for a bathroom in California, you can get a whole house with students who'll pay double what the mortgage is in Arizona. So since I went to school out there at the Harvard of the Southwest, University of Arizona, she had her clients buying out there, and she said, "Hey, I want you to watch these properties." Well, by the time we got to 2004, I had enough under my belt where I decided to go out on my own. And June 2004 opened GoldenWest, had probably like 12 properties under management at the time, all my own clients, and grew it from there. And then eventually went around the horn. So from Tucson, we went to Phoenix. From Phoenix, we went to Vegas. And then I was managing a lot of the property from my couch in California. So I was like, you know what? We're just going to actually open an office in California. So we sold the Tucson office in 2012 and used that money to open up the San Diego office. So that's how we had Phoenix, Las Vegas, and then San Diego. And from there, we grew quite a bit. I think at that time, the market had totally crashed and investors were back in. So there's a lot of people buying investment property at that time. So we went from having, a couple hundred doors to almost 1,600 doors. And the growth was huge, but it was kind of all over the place. And one of the things I found was I wasn't making any money. So fast forward to 2018, I was trying to figure out how I had almost 1,600 doors and wasn't making any money. And I started to get out of my shell and meet people in our industry, NARPM, and then guys like Jordan and Danny from Profit Coach. And I went to one meeting, and I remember saying, what, hey, I only charge this, and we don't have a leasing fee, or we don't have any of these fees. And Jordan cued the room, and everybody else like, yeah, we all charge these things. And so from there, changed our model. We said we're going to focus on service, and in order to do that, we're going to raise our prices. So we raised our prices quite a bit and change our focus from, hey, we're going to just have as many doors as we can, to we're going to have some of the best operational skill, and we're going to be, a little more on the higher price point. And we did that, and I lost 30% of my doors. But we gained, 60% more in revenue. And we've been working to uh, formalize and make our systems approach to property management as efficient as possible ever since. And it's been a game changer. And it's kind of where we are now in 2023. We're doing well. I've got 32 members on staff, got a director of operations, I've got a sales team, and I wish I would have done all this a lot earlier than 2019.
That's quite a ride, Jayson. Thanks for sharing that. So that's obviously what we want to talk about, is kind of what do you wish you knew on day one? And what's can be a little deceiving about that is we like you could just say, hey, I just wish I charged a whole lot more. But then sometimes you look back and you're like, well, maybe I wouldn't have got to the first milestone if I
Right.
didn't, right? And so I always say, like, if you're looking around at $1 million companies and you're a $10 company, you don't necessarily need to do exactly what they're doing on all fronts. You might go out of business, you know, if they got a big office
Right.
and you got no clients, maybe you don't need a big office yet. You know what I mean? But there are some things that we all kind of wish we knew from the beginning. So I want you to share anything you want, but I specifically want to tee in on what you said, which was I got to 1,600 doors, which is a very common entrepreneurial story I hear all the time. Man, I'm so successful, not making any money. Everything, you know,
Right.
it's like 1 foot forward, 2 steps back. So, what would you specifically, what would you maybe have done earlier or different or been more aware of going into that within that context?
So the number one thing I would have done differently is I would have paid more attention to my peers and the organizations in our space. Now, I would say property management is actually a relatively young industry. I remember when I got in, almost everybody was a realtor who happened to handle rentals versus like a licensed property manager whose sole focus was on property management. And that's our mantra now. So I would have looked at my peers and what they were doing, what would be successful. I also would have been able to glean some of the benchmarks I didn't have then, like, well, what should I be making on direct labor? What should I be spending on direct labor? What should I be spending on overhead? How many people, give or take, per property should I be using? So that having a better framework to how to create the right format for my company, that would have helped. And I believe I could have gotten that had I been more receptive to work with my peers, where my mindset was, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to figure this out. That broker is actually my competition. I don't want to go talk with them. I don't want to share what I'm doing or bother to hear what they have to say because that's my competition. It was the wrong mindset. So that's number one, have a more open mindset to work with my peers and work and get involved in the industry operations so I can learn what are other people doing best practice wise and implement it in my own company.
It's
That's
great.
number one.
Yeah, so you just actually really made a great point, Jayson. I mean, 20 years ago, this industry didn't even exist. From what I've seen, now it's easy to like wake up and start today. Would that advice still hold true today? If you were giving me advice and I'm starting, would you say the same thing? Should I still be looking around and learning the metrics and meeting my peers?
Absolutely 100%. Because I would tell you that if you were opening your own property management today, or let's say you're a realtor, the market's changed, you've been looking after like 8 to 10 properties, and you're like, do I want to go for this? The first thing I would say is go for it, but take a look at the best practices from those in your industry. And if you don't want to get too close with those people in your market, look at the people market north or south or west. If you're in San Diego, look at what they're doing in Orange County. Okay. That would be the best way to go. Like, okay, what are they charging? What kind of staff do they have? What size office and expenses? And if you do it in a setting like a NARPM or some kind of property management organization where you can learn and it's okay for us to kind of be open and share what we're doing, you at least have some benchmarks to start with. Okay. And those are things that I didn't have per se, but I didn't seek out until, 10 years in. Did I start going like looking around and going, what are you doing? What are you charging? So I see you got a leasing fee. Like, does that really work? Like, I don't, every time I talk to a new client, they're like, well, I don't want to pay a leasing fee. But I was wrong. I was wrong about that. So that is a huge thing. If you're starting right now, I encourage you to get in the market. There's enough business for everyone. I think if you look at the metrics, I think it was 60% of investment properties are still self-managed. I think that was the last number I saw. 60%. There's a lot of business out there for the rest of us, and for those who do it right. And I mean, that would be the next part I would go into is immerse yourself in it is what we do as a property manager. Like, you're not a realtor who happens to handle rentals. This is a totally different ballgame than sales. It's a totally different ballgame than, say, commercial real estate strip malls, residential rentals, especially long term. Yeah, they've got landlord tenant laws
Yeah.
that it matters if you don't know what you're doing. It matters if your contracts aren't correct. So that's my next spot. Make sure that you're paying attention to the laws and the rules of our space, get the right contracts, because if you do, not only are you going to protect your client, you're going to protect yourself, and you're going to avoid a lot of the uh I would say tripwires that I might have snagged on my way to figuring out like that's not the right way to do things.
That's great. Yeah, I will say coming into this industry, I was like, wow, you guys, it's property management. It's just the term you guys made up to tell people at a cocktail party what you do. It's like you got to know accounting, you got to do legal, you got to know maintenance.
Right.
I mean, it is a deep business. So, well said. So obviously, aligning yourself with other people, like you said, and then I heard a second thing in there that I just want to point out, which was getting those contracts right, getting the expectations right, like setting, I think learning the standards about the business
Right.
thing, just to put it a different way. Is that what I'm hearing?
You know what? That's probably even a better way to say it. Learning the standards, the professional standards of what we do. And you're right, it does encompass everything from how your relationship should be with client and tenant, how it should be, how your contract should be rolled out, your management agreement, your leasing agreement, and how you should be able to go ahead over approach your overall daily, weekly, monthly activity when it is managing a rental. When do you collect rent? When do you start late fees? When do you get adversarial with a tenant or a client versus when do you like your job is to find meeting of the minds? Professional standards of how to do business is super important. And it's something that, again, we just kind of were winging it in the beginning until I really started to get immersed in like, hey, what does the law really say? Hey, what should my contract really cover? Things like that.
That's great. So I'd also say that I'm taking away, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jason, but I've also experienced where some people feel like they got to get all their pencils in order and they need to know under every law and they need to know everything and they don't ever start, right? So it sounds like you were comfortable starting without knowing everything, but then you just wish you maybe like started to really talk to some other people understanding what to do, because I see both sides of the coin, right? Some people never get started if they feel like they have to be an expert. But also some people just are cowboys for way too long before they ever like start checking into like the rules and regulations.
You're right about that. And again, I think we were a little bit cowboys, but look, my background being in the Marine Corps was very much about make that 70% solution. Okay. Or so when we're faced with a problem, you're going to find 70% of the answers to that problem, and then you're going to make a decision, you're going to move forward. And so if you sit back and overanalyze it to death, you never get off the couch. But if you go charging headlong without having at least a decent amount of information to make a decision or make the proper decision, you can go in the wrong direction and go off the cliff. So you're right. There is a balance like anything. And I would say that I encourage anybody who wants to get into our industry or is managing a couple and wants to take it larger. Hey, immerse yourself, but you're going to have to sometimes make the best decision with the information you have. And you'll learn as you go, you'll gain that experience. And I don't think that's a bad thing. We've learned a lot of hard lessons. And nowadays, I feel very blessed that we have the experience to go, now we've been down that road. And I think where that really helps, and this is tougher for the younger property managers, like I've had a lot of those conversations already with clients before. Why is it not okay to not make a repair? Or why is it that tenant, it's okay to give tenant a little leeway here? Or why is it that we don't give leeway to a tenant there? These are things that we wanted to experience that unfortunately my younger, newer property manager self, I'm gonna have to say, don't worry, go slow, but you're gonna learn as you go. Learn those lessons once, write them down so that your team can learn off of them. And then you won't make the same mistakes over and over again to shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, new mistakes are fine. The same mistakes are
You're
fine,
right.
right? Is something I say all the time, and that's great. I want to ask you that, Jason, because we've been in a relationship for a couple of years, and I've watched you. You're pushing the boundaries. You're punching above your weight. You're moving to new levels, and just as an entrepreneur, that's something I also always want to make sure whenever I'm giving somebody advice on like looking back, I'm like, just know that today I am now out of my comfort zone on the next thing, right? So you're kind of like, you're not growing if you're not kind of in that next level and out of your comfort zone at any point. If you wake up one day and you know everything about your business and there's no fear and there's no problems, like maybe, now you're stagnant, right? And I've just watched you. So I want to say that, like I've watched you, you seem very comfortable being uncomfortable and trying new things, which is great. So I also don't want to leave that out of there.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, I really appreciate that. And again, like I can't and you've been here too. You're an entrepreneur. You've been in that place where there's some nights where you're in here at 11 o'clock at night going, how am I gonna fix this? How are we gonna make this better? What do we need to do to get to the next level? Um, but if you're that kind of person who's like, you know what, we can do it, or you see that vision, you're gonna be successful. Just kind of following some of the rules of the road we talked about and that others have brought to the table. But again, going back to if I started, we talked about a couple of things, getting involved, knowing the professional standards, getting involved with your peers, learning their best practices. A couple other things I would add in. Okay, one, create a system early, okay, and provide the training to match that system. Because I can tell you what, I didn't make a robust training package until I had trained the 30th person where I was like, I'm saying the same thing over and over again. Wouldn't it be great if I had some kind of video, a Word document, a diagram to show them, like, hey, this is how we write a lease. This is how we respond to a new management inquiry. This is the heuristic on how we respond to a repair request. Making a system approach to your operation and then backing it up with actual training, visual, audio, and like in something that can be read. If you do those things, start one major blocking and tackling task at a time. Eventually, you'll have a library of how do we do this, and it's very easy to then teach those standards to your newer and incoming staff. And your older and current staff will be able to then they can teach the standard. And all of a sudden, we all have the same vision of what the expectation is as we continue to grow and scale. And so often, as young entrepreneurs, we're like, I got big shoulders, I'm going to do everything. Well, if you have all the information, if you're the only place to find the knowledge on how to do something, it's not a winning success for quality growth, for scaling. And so that's one thing that it took me a while to do. Build a scalable model of what I wanted my company to look like, and then have sustainable, repeatable, easily defined training on those blocking and tackling tips.
Amazing. That's great. Systems are the path to scale. As our good mutual friend Jordan Milius told me one time, he's like, I finally learned that scaling is just about hiring and training. Like, it's actually like you don't have to do anything except for hire and train, and that's how you scale. So that's great. I would like to talk about the people side. You and I were kind of the conversation. What have you learned about people, and what's worked, what hasn't for you, and what do you wish you knew the day you started? Because I'm sure you learned a lot about people in this business.
Well, this is a huge piece of what we do, Jeremy. I can't tell you how important it is to hire the right people, but you're gonna get a lot of them wrong. Like that's just the nature of the beast, number one. And number two, though we're trying to create careers, the jobs that we have, it may not be forever for certain people. We have to be comfortable with the fact that we may hire a great person, we may train them and build them, and 2 or 3 years later, they're saying thank you and they're moving on to something else. And that's okay. So I would take the same approach we just talked about hiring and onboarding. It has to be a systems approach to it. You have to have clear expectation for the job of what you're hiring. Okay. If you don't have that, you're going to inevitably have butting heads of what and expectations of what somebody's supposed to do. What's their role? What's their job? What is the expectations for success? If you can't define it clearly, how can they meet those goals? So before you hire someone, draw it out. Even if it's just a couple big blue arrow bullet points, success looks like if you do this. That's number one. And number two, when you go through the hiring process, you should have a decent, way of, what you want, reviewing resumes and screening all that. But most importantly, when you pick the person, make sure you onboard them and train them deliberately. Because if you can't get out of week one, week two, week four, if you can't get them to 30 days in a clean and successful systems approach manner where it's very clear what they need to know, how you're going to train them, and when they need to know by, it is very difficult to even onboard the best possible employee if you're just like, well, there you go, here's a deep end swim. So going back when I first started, it was just like, I need help with this. There's a warm body come in. Okay. And I get it. But you have to learn to do a couple of those extra things to set yourself up for success and the other person when you're hiring so that you can get a team member who can be successful. They can meet those standards and you can give them the tools so they can actually be, they know how to get to those standards. And that's something I didn't do in the beginning. And any new person starting any kind of company, if you're going to have employees, you got to start there with those things. That would be huge advice.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've watched that happen many times. It takes all of us way too long to learn that lesson. So I appreciate you sharing that.
I mean, people is difficult.
Yeah.
Don't you think, Jeremy? People is it's the hardest thing because as entrepreneurs, we have our own type of personality. The other people we work with, especially as we get a little bit bigger and more successful, there's a lot of people, so there's a lot of personalities. And if you get an A-type player, their personality is going to be front and center. And you as a leader have to know how to work through those things when they're doing well and don't agree with you, when they're not doing well. You got to be able to work through all those. And I didn't learn it right away. And I'm still learning it today. I'm still learning how to be a better leader, a better boss, a better CEO, a better trainer, a better mentor. But in the beginning, if you can just do some basics and blocking and tackling, as we discussed here on hiring the right person and then onboarding them for success, you're going to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah, it's a great point. I don't know if it's just because I'm not good at it and incompetent, or if it's the lesson, but like to me, people management is a lifetime learning lesson. You never got figured out. And like I said, maybe there's other people that do have it figured out, but to me, it's like the whole people management thing is every time you got it figured out, you get a curveball, right? Like one after the other.
I honestly, when I look at mentors, the mentors that I focus on, those people are the best with people in team management. They can create an awesome team. They can manage egos. They can manage people because my skill set there, I have a lot of great strengths. It's one of my weaknesses, and so I'm constantly looking at mentors who have these strengths, so I can try to glean like, okay, what are they doing? What tools are they using to be successful at managing people? And you're right. I mean, I'm still not great at it, and I think I'm going to be learning constantly for as long as I'm in business.
So let me ask you about that, Jayson, because it is, just total curiosity mindset myself. I think in the early days, I felt like if there was a weakness in me as the leader, I had to just double down and fix that weakness. But then other times I've had way more success just bringing in somebody else and being like, hey, this is a weakness of mine. And now you guys all know it. And I'm going to delegate this to somebody else. So what are your thoughts? As you kind of grow, you keep seeing weaknesses. Is your go-to to more like, I got to fix this, or I need to find somebody that can fix this weakness for me?
Well, first of all, this is the heart of separating the hey, I own a business and I do well to like I own a business and I crush to like I'm a billionaire, right?
Yeah.
I own multiple businesses that make tons of money. And so the farther you get at better at these things, the higher up you're gonna go. I mean that you can roll up your sleeves and run a business and do fine. Okay, with a hard work and determination. But if you want to get to the pinnacle where you are in your industry or kind of the ability to have multiple business as an entrepreneur, you have to be successful at these things. And one of the ways to approach it that you just brought up is, do you double down and try to do it all on your own, or do you hire to fill in the weaknesses that you have? And I got to be honest, I'm always working on myself. But if you can, when you hire, look for people who are the yin to your yang, you are going to be more successful, especially if you can be confident and comfortable with somebody who is actually good at the things you aren't. That's right. You won't be Superman and be able to do it all. You'll have to rely and trust someone else to do those things in your organization that you are not very good at. But when you get to that point, it's, it's a force multiplier. So I'm lucky enough to have a director of operations, a integrator, a vice president, if you will, that is the complete opposite to the way my personality is structured. And not only has it made our company a million times better, revenue, I can tell you, but just in the fact that I'm able to then focus on things that I'm better at, that are more my strengths. And he's able to help fill in the gaps where I might have a weakness, or we as a company could benefit from the fact that it's his strength. And so we have been much more successful. And I would, again, when we're talking about hiring in the beginning, it's tough to hire a VP or an integrator. Okay, you're still hiring frontline blocking and tackling. But when you get to start hiring managers or headquarters, senior level people, absolutely should focus on trying to find people that have similar cultural values, but have strengths where might have weaknesses.
Totally agree. It's great. Well put. Appreciate you sharing that. Definitely can mirror that lesson on my own standpoint for sure.
Jeremy, don't you think that we talked a lot about like, when we said strengths, weaknesses, systems, but culture is a big deal. And I'll just put it in the simplest ways that I can in my knuckle dragon mind is, hey, if our culture is like, hey, we are work and grind nonstop, Monday through Sunday, we're in the office 10, 12 hours, but hey, when it's time to take a break, my phone's off, I'm never here. If that's our culture, okay, if our culture is we're going to be blunt, we're going to be direct, we're going to be raw, but okay, we all check our ego at the door. So we brush the shoulder off when we're getting criticized, we can calm down. Whatever that culture is, if you hire people that fit like that and move away from people that don't fit in that culture, you're going to be much more successful. And that's just my opinion. I would love to say I'm Jocko and I have everything worked out, but I don't. So I had to create a culture that fits and find people that fit in that culture. What's your feedback on culture? How do you use it and to be successful in your game?
Great question. By the way, I want to say for the article for the writers, I sometimes I pick up these things, Jayson. I want to make sure that everyone else is hearing what I'm hearing. I love that you just literally ping ponged from hire the yin to your yang, but you're talking about a skill set. So we want diversity of skills, but we want like a homogeneous culture. So I want people that listen, you can give me all the projects in the world and you're like, Jeremy, you got to get taxes done. And I'll just make up time where I work on marketing and strategy. And then there's people I know that I'm like, you give them all the marketing work they do and they're like, well, I had to file the taxes. Like people just have a natural reaction, right? So I think so you're saying like the yin to the yang, we all have a draw to like a certain skill set and you need diversity there. But then you want just absolute match when it comes to what do I value? How do I think? Like I grind. I don't care if you're grinding on marketing or setting an event up or customer service or taxes. Like I grind, right? So did I get that right? Because I feel like that was an awesome lesson.
Absolutely. So for us, and you said the right word, my company culture is grinders. Like we grind. Okay. Like we grind. But the truth of the matter is you even hit it in the head beforehand, like, oh, this is a sales project. Here we go. Jason's like already running over there. Like, I'll grind for 48 hours straight, where it's like it's an ops project. Run. What are you doing, brother? You want to take this one? So you're right. Like skill set, who's a better blocker, who's a better tackler, who's a better thrower. That's totally different than like, hey, who's got a certain mindset, who's mentally tough, who can, like I said, the word grind is perfect for us versus other companies. I've noticed their culture is they're much more fluid. It's much easier for them to go like, look, we're not going to wrap around the axle. We're going to be in here from 9 to 4. We're going to be efficient. We're going to get the things done. Where we're over here is like, we want to be efficient, but if I got to grind, I'm going to grind. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
So you're right. Culture and skill set, totally different things.
That's because I think that's where people get really lost when the people start saying you should have a diverse team. But we're not saying you should have diverse values. You should just have diverse skill sets and diverse backgrounds, right? Diverse mindsets to a certain extent, but values.
It matters. Like here's a tiny example, and this is just my own viewpoint on it. But I noticed when I hire managers who are very tenant centric, they really valued the tenant. They're always like, oh, but we can't do this to tenants. I noticed they never fit well with the company culture. I'm not saying that's not the right mindset to have. It just didn't seem to fit well with us because a lot of our systems approach are the owner of the property is our client. We have a fiduciary responsibility. We owe respect and fairness to the tenant, but when your heart bleeds for the tenant less than the client, I just noticed it wasn't a good cultural fit. So that was an example of a real world. Like when we hire, we would ask questions to property managers about, how would they solve like an issue where a landlord wouldn't repair something that probably should be repaired for a tenant. And we would look for those responses to be, are they going overboard on the tenant?
Yeah,
And then we would notice like they might not be a good cultural fit for us.
that's great.
That's just one small example of what,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, it's something I've learned. You said how to use culture, and I've learned this from Entrepreneurs Organization. If you got 5 company values, you should have 5 questions you ask in an interview that
To
like help
match that.
that, right? But then they tell you like you're not going to come up with them in this meeting. It might take you years to come up with the 5 questions. So like sounds like you got one really great scenario that you can ask, where you can start. You just doesn't matter. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just telling you everything you need to know about their mindset. So I definitely appreciate that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. A great example of that is I had a salesperson at one point, and she was great. But if she ever called on someone and she thought that we owed them something or that something didn't get done, she'd stop selling for a whole week and go into customer service mode, like a whole week,
Right.
not just like get it done one day, but it would seem
Yeah.
like it took her off her game for like an entire week. And I'm like,
Right.
you belong in customer service. Like, you're not wrong for wanting to do that. But like,
Yeah.
knowing what we hired you for, like, it was just so telling. You know what I mean? I was like, you're in the wrong role or you're in the wrong company. I don't know what it was. But like, literally, that's just a great example that I wanted to share with the audience, because like I've seen it and I'm like, wow. I'm like, people are just inclined certain ways and you can't fight gravity, just go with gravity.
That honestly, you hit another key point there is hiring the person for the right position.
Yeah.
Like you may hire a talented person, but if you put them the round peg and the square hole, it's not going to work. The salespeople, the customer service people, they're not going to be as successful in the sales role as they might be in the ops role, or vice versa. So, I mean, we could go days and days on hiring, and again, starting if we just thought about like, hey, Jayson writing to his past self saying like, hey, you open this letter, you're starting a business, stick with the basics, walking and tackling. You're trying to build a culture, but
Yep.
look, set clear expectations of a job description and what success looks like. And then when you hire, make sure you onboard and set the training so they can figure out their way in the first week, 2 weeks, and 30 days how to get there going. Because once they get the wheels turned, they know where the bathroom is, they know where the copier is. If they're getting good training, like that person that you hired, that cultural fit, that talent that you hired, boom, it'll do the rest. But if you can't get them out the front door,
Got it.
it's not gonna.
So the way you start the training is hypercritical, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you have to be. How many times have you seen a scenario where it's like, welcome aboard, here's your key card, and like, okay, like, so go ahead and take that call. It's
Go
like,
get
wait,
them.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah, go get them. And so, as much as I appreciate the hiring question of, hey, if I threw you in the deep end, and I didn't give you a lot of training, could you swim? Like, I appreciate that. But
Yeah.
we, as leaders, as a company, we have to set. I'm not talking about a library of training. This isn't IBM. Okay, I'm talking about we at least got to get them out the door. You got to have a plan for them to get through week 1, week 2, and then 30 days. Like at the end of 30 days, you should be able to test them like, these are the expectation I wanted you to know.
Yep.
Here's where we trained on them. Now, let me see that you know. Because if you can just 30 days, I'm not even talking 90, week, 2 weeks, and then 30 days, you will infinitely increase the chance of the person you brought on going like, hey, like, I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what success goals are. I learned some basics to get me from A to B. I can learn the rest as I go. And in the beginning, like we did a lot of like, here you go, just watch what I do. Okay, now I'm gone today. Go ahead and figure it out. And
Would you
that's just
I
that's
totally
like
agree with
right.
this, because I'm going through this right now. We were talking at the beginning of the call, new people coming on. What are the non-negotiables? Clearly, I can't teach them everything. I'm going to miss some stuff. I'm trying to prioritize the right things. So I don't want to oversell. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jayson, but obviously knowing your Marine background, I'm thinking I was not in the military, but I know about basic training. I'm thinking about Hell Week when I used to play Pop Warner football. Like, that first week where they're just like, you got to get through this. You got to be able to know these things. You got to be able to put your pads on. You got to get hit. You got to know how to get up. You got to know what the timing is. Like, is it similar? Is it like we just gotta? Is it a good parallel to like basic training? Just get them in there, get them all the basics, and then from there they'll either succeed or they won't. But at least everybody has the basic knowledge.
That's a great parallel. And I gotta say that it is similar. Let's use that term like we're fire hosing them with information. And I would tell you that really the next level is okay. Now, what do you do days 31 to 60 to 90? Because when you fire hose them with a good plan and a lot of information, you got to assume there's going to be a little bit of attrition of that knowledge because it's new. But the more you reinforce it, if you build that plan for after those 30 days, the even better they're going to be. But yes, you are fire hosing them with your culture, though you're blocking and tackling how you do things, and you're expecting them to get through 0 to 30. Because you'll know by the time you get to 30 days if they have what it takes to be able to invest more time to get to the next 30, 60. And by the time they get to 90, that's when you're doing that review, going like, we got a gem, or like, we failed. This isn't the right fit. And so my description and the way of what we need to do for onboarding and your description of like, hey, is it kind of like a hell week type? You just got to get through it, a fire hose method is very, very similar. And as a business owner, what you do after that first 30 days to reinforce what you train them, it's going to get them very comfortable and confident in those basics. They're going to be able to know it very well, and they're going to do well for you. But yeah, you got to go through those first 30 days. I think I said it earlier. People don't even know where they are in the first 30 days. They're like, where's the bathroom? Where's the copier? Like, who's that? Who is that? They don't even know. So, like, when I hear managers going like, well, they signed the checklist. I taught them how to write a lease and take a call. And I'm like, of course you went through the basics, but they may not have retained all that because like you read it to them, you showed them once, you had them do it with you standing over them, and then you moved on. Like, and then you taught them 40 other things. Is that reality that they're going to retain it all? So you're right. You got to get through
Do
it. You got
that.
to know it, but
Yeah,
it's not
I
the
love
end
it.
all be all.
That's what we do. We do that with our training. We try to teach our coaches as they're training new BDMs. It's like assuming that they're going to remember everything you told them one time it's like the definition of insanity. Like there's no
Right.
way, you know what I mean? So just this week, I just shared with Jayson, we had the 3 new people start. I repeated the training I did on Monday morning today, and then I asked them to tell me how different the training was after
Right.
actually being in the trenches. Like I'm giving you the exact same information, and it was just cool to be like, oh yeah, this makes way more sense now. Like I've got context. Like
Yeah.
now I'm getting it, you know? And so yeah, I think unfortunately we have a certain flaw being like, I told him once, send him the video,
And
he watched it, you know?
yeah. Oh my gosh, you're so right. And again, as an entrepreneur, when you're talking to your mid-level managers, or hey, I know you trained him, but before you get upset that they didn't meet the expectation, go back and have them show you how they're doing it. Do one more training with them, then have them show you how they're doing it, because just like you said, it's probably different the second or third time. Now, the product coach team, I remember listening to one of their mentors talk about doing monthly reset training. And if you get to that point where you can fit in, you know, 30 minutes twice a month on some blocking and tackling reset training, I think it's great. Okay. But you may not be there in year one, year two. But my point being is that the blocking and tackling training is so important. And the fact that when it changes, that you update it and you retrain with everybody, that's so key. But if your training library is like 1,000 training slides, is that really what you need? Or
Yeah.
do you need maybe 100 that are of the exact blocking tackling skills we got? That way we can always get them out, spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes on a hip pocket, like, hey, this is how we do this. Or, hey, junior manager over there in Phoenix, get up here. You've been here for 6 months. Talk me through this. Tell me this makes sense to you. And if it doesn't, raise your hand.
Amazing. Yeah, I think we could have a whole nother article, Jayson, about training.
On training.
I think I mean to do that actually, like in the very near future.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is great. These are the things you're just thinking about, a decade in or 15 years in versus like day one. But these were great shares. I want to wrap up because I know we both have time. We're at the hour, but anything else we missed? Anything else you want to just kind of tell yourself in the early days that we didn't get to?
Okay, two last points. Okay, we talked about setting up a system, talked about being a professional, and we said, hey, go for it, push, make that 70% solution, go for it. Talked about how important it was hiring and onboarding people. I think there's probably a million other things, but two other things that really are important to me. The first one is, look, you're gonna grind, you're gonna put in a lot of hours, but put some time out for family if you got it. Okay. Prioritize your time. Okay. Because if not, you're just working from your email. You're going to be going down every rabbit hole. Prioritize the big things you need to do to move your company along. Then the basic things you do to set your subordinates up for success, and then time for your family or yourself. Do not lose sight of where that gym is, or walking outside, or going on a hike, or going on a swim. Do not lose sight of personal time for you. It does you no good if you come out 5 years later, 40 pounds overweight, you're balding and because you're pulling your hair out and you're just overall smoking 2 packs a day. It's not going to work. And if you got a family there, all you're going to do is hurt your relationship with them on time you can't get back. So that's a huge priority to me. And I think that it can't be overstated how important prioritizing time, especially when it comes to family. And then the last thing that I would add it, and again, I know we said it as cliche, but do not be afraid to set your price point. That's something that's going to allow you to make money. Do not be afraid to open up, even if you're not an accounting major, open up your books once a month and go, this is what I'm spending. This is what I'm earning. Okay. How do I set it up so I'm actually making somewhat of a profit? Because if you keep saying, no, no, I can't do it that way, I have to do it this, so you're making no money, there is no reason for you to be in business. There is none. Do not wait 8, 10 years like I did to actually make money. Have thousands of doors or thousands of clients and not being able to actually bring in a healthy profit, because that profit doesn't just go into your pocket. It goes into the people that are in your business. When they're successful, when they got the nice car, and we talked about this, when they're doing well, you know you as a company is doing well. Okay. And if you start off this business being the cheapest or not understanding, what your price point is and what it costs to run that business so you make money, it's going to be a long time before you fix it. And you don't need to do that.
Well, great, amazing 2 points. We should have started there, Jayson. They're all good points.
Don't forget to make money.
No,
Set time for the gym or your family. Yeah.
It was a great closing. I mean, no, it's just carving out the thing. I mean, I say this all the time. Yeah, you just don't want to build the biggest business if you don't know why you're doing it and who you're doing it for, and you're not enjoying yourself. Listen, I mean, I do actually agree. Like, building a business can be a lot of fun and a place you want to spend your time in, but it can also be an addictive. It can be like a substance abuse problem. You know what I mean? It can be like, this is all I got to do. I got to spend all my time here. This is my identity. And that's super dangerous. And I actually don't think a lot of good stuff comes out of that. Some of the
that's a great, Jeremy. That's a conversation for you and me and Klaus Azul for sure. Like, that is exactly, because I could go down the route, and just hearing you say that, like, I agree wholeheartedly. Like, have you ever found yourself just working to work? Like, I'm just coming in the office because that's what my habit is.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, what am I really doing here?
Yeah. Yeah, anyone who's addicted to anything just does it out of habit, right? And they're not thoughtful about it. They're not asking, is this serving me or not? And so
Right.
many times, and it becomes an identity, which I get it. Like, I mean, listen, my identity is, I love to serve my clients. I love what I do. It fills me up with a ton of pride. I love to share lessons I've learned, but like, it can go overboard real fast. You can like go over the hump and just go on the down.
Yeah. Somebody said, yeah, you feel this way as an entrepreneur, but you're not your business. The success or failures of business isn't you personally.
Yeah.
And so often us as entrepreneurs, it's why we freak out if you got a negative review. Like, negative reviews aren't good, but
yeah,
everything we take, every upset client, we'll take it to heart. And it's like, whoa, it's a business. It's there for a means to an end. What is your why?
Yeah.
And so those things that you said ring very true to me. Maybe because this is my first business. I've opened a couple other smaller businesses from now, and I don't take them personally at all. Like, they're my babies, but they're not my they're not my first children. I'm kind of like, yeah, well, we'll do fine. We'll be okay.
Yeah,
so
totally. Yeah, it's a slippery slope, because people are involved. Like, it's like you buy a stock. Everyone's like, you don't make the stock your identity, their performance. But you're not hiring those people, and you're not building the culture, and it's an entirely intoxicating thing that everybody needs to be aware of. And it's good in a certain way. Like, it's a privilege to be able to build a company and build a team and serve people and deliver something that didn't exist before you're around. But man, can that just suck you in at the cost of everything else in your life, like you said. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Jeremy, I honestly always enjoy talking to you, especially your entrepreneurial mindset, your background in sales, because that's my background, and the fact that this isn't your first rodeo. I love it. But I really enjoyed our conversation today. It's been a while since I thought about like, okay, well, what would I tell myself 20 years ago, basically, on
Yeah.
day one when I got that first like Excel spreadsheet and the first paper checkbook. I'm like, oh, I got a business.
Yeah. We asked someone else to do this interview, Jayson. I think you'll appreciate this. I won't name him on the recording, but I think you might know him. And when I asked him to do it, he said, I actually like this has been on my list of like self realization things to do anyway. Like I actually should reflect
Right.
20 years into my business. He's done very well. And he's like, I should. So it's just something we should always be thinking about because there's, I'm a big believer that we all need kind of the one up, one down, one across mentorship. Should always be talking to somebody a couple steps behind us, someone a couple of steps ahead, someone right there. And if you're not self-aware, if you're not really learning what did it, what got you there, it's going to be hard to really add value in that relationship. So, but I'm a big believer in that. Always reflect on it. And by the way, reflecting, whether things are good or bad, it just creates a definite sense of gratitude and
Yeah.
learning. And so to me, it's always mentally healthy to do this. So really appreciate you giving us all the good shares, Jayson.
It's great, man. My pleasure. Thank you for having me on and getting this rolling. And
Yeah,
I look forward to our next chat
me too.
with Costa Azul.
Yes.